Hi, everybody. This is Bob Goodwin, founder of Career Club, and welcome to another episode of LinkedIn Live with Career Club. If you're not familiar with Career Club, we're using proven sales and marketing tools to help people find a career that matters to them. Please feel free to connect with me directly on LinkedIn, as well as follow Career Club. And then you can also check us out at career.club. Normally, our LinkedIn Lives are just that live, but unfortunately, we're not able to do that today because our guest is quite busy, and we're very pleased to get him as we can. Our guest today is the CEO of SHRM, the Society for Human Resources Management, Dr. Johnny Taylor Jr. And with that, Johnny, welcome.
Hey, I'm glad you called me doctor. I have a JD, but I kind of don't call myself. I'm just Johnny. Thank you, Bob, for having me here.
And Johnny, it is. So Johnny, you're the CEO of SHRM. SHRM's what, 300,000 members in 165 countries?
Yes, sir.
And I believe it's the largest HR professional organization in the world?
It is. Yes, Very proud of that.
And how long have you been at SHRM?
Guess what? 5 years as of December 17th of this year. So
congratulations.
4 3/4 years. Yes, I'm counting like my daughter counts her age, right? I'm 4 3/4, right?
Yeah, there you go. Well, so just so folks can get to know you a little bit better, we do what we like to call Rock's Fab Five, which is just a little bit of an icebreaker. Yeah, a good friend of mine, Rock Robinson. People just get to know each other as human beings a little bit first. So where were you born and raised?
Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Born and raised. Never left town until I went to college, and then it was only 26 miles away.
You're a hurricane, aren't you?
All the way, the U, baby. Yes, yes.
No, I'm in Ohio, so Ohio State likes to talk about the Ohio State. So yeah, but we will defer to the Canes today. The U, I love it. And then just a little bit about your family.
So, as I said, I'm born and raised in Fort Lauderdale. I have siblings, 3 of them, actually 2. There are 3 of us total. I have 2 sisters to my parents' marriage. And then I have a 32-year-old son and a 12-year-old daughter. And
my goodness.
Here in Alexandria, the 32-year-old is in Dallas running the family business. And my 12-year-old is now, as she reminded me, going into the 7th grade. She's a young woman. Her words, not mine. And we live here. Yeah, right. Alexandria, Virginia.
Oh, that's awesome. That's a beautiful part of the country. So just because you've had a very interesting career, do you mind just sharing with folks just a little bit about your career arc and how it was that you ended up leading SHRM?
Bob, it's so funny when people say interesting, that word's like, I don't know if there's a compliment or what, but I've had a lot of jobs and different types of jobs. I'm a lawyer by training. And then I began as a tax lawyer and went into ERISA work and ultimately labor and employment law in-house and inside of major corporations, and also at times at a law firm, which is where I began. I then became an HR executive. First vice president role was VP of HR at Blockbuster. Yes, there was a company called Blockbuster. And then spent several years at Viacom companies, Paramount Pictures and the affiliates, et cetera, ultimately becoming general counsel and head of HR for Paramount's live entertainment group. And then got into the nonprofit world after 2 or 3 different successive senior HR roles. I was once CHRO for Fortune 500 company IAC, which at that time owned Ticketmaster, Home Shopping Network, Match.com. So a big conglomerate, and I was the global CHRO, and then found myself retiring. At 40 years old, I decided I'd done all of the things I wanted, a couple of nice financial exits, and I went to do what I call purpose work. And my first purpose assignment that lasted for 7.5 years was running the Thurgood Marshall College Fund, which was focused on historically Black colleges and universities, the state or publicly supported schools, and then arrived at SHRM, as I said, 4 years and 9 months ago to lead the world's largest HR association. So I'm a lawyer, an HR guy, and a CEO in the for-profit and nonprofit space.
Wow, what a diversity of experiences that you've had.
Interesting, Bob.
Eclectic.
Right.
So what do we find you doing, Johnny, when you're not at work? What do you like to do outside of work besides say yes, ma'am to your 7th grader?
Favorite pastime in the world is playing cards. Any type of cards, from Go Fish to Uno to a game I call Spades to Bid Whist. I am just a card player. And so whenever I have downtime, I'm sitting around the table with a group of friends playing cards.
Now, is money ever involved in any of these card games?
Money is always involved.
I thought it might be.
That's the only way you do it. No, and sometimes it's monopoly money, just in case some of your folks from the IRS are listening. No, I actually just have fun, not big money, but yeah, it's a way of keeping score. So yes.
Awesome. Very cool. So thank you for that. That was really fun. So, so I'd like to start off just, helping people who may not be completely familiar with SHRM. If you just wouldn't mind describing maybe the mission and the vision of SHRM.
Yes. So the best way for people to really understand SHRM, I use this. We are to the HR profession what the American Bar Association would be to lawyers, or the American Medical Association would be to physicians. We are the group that represents the trade association representing the HR profession. And that includes all types of HR professionals, whether they're in talent acquisition, employee benefits, HRIS and systems and HR tech, like all HR professionals. We are that body that represents the profession.
That's awesome. And then I'm very curious, and I suspect COVID has really kind of played with this, but how's the organization changed in the last 3 to 5 years, and then maybe a little bit about how you really see the organization changing over the next 5?
Well, so I was lucky is the only way to say, are you lucky or smart? Well, I'm clearly just lucky and maybe a little smarts in. About 5 years ago, when I decided to join SHRM, it was because I literally felt palpably that the country and indeed the globe was going to start truly appreciating. And when I mean appreciating, not nicely, but just understanding the value of humans and human capital. So I took the role because I just felt like we were at a special moment in time back in 2017 when when the role was announced, and I ultimately started in January of 2018. So the story goes, what we've done over the last several years is rebuilt SHRM. At the time I joined, we were 70 years old. And we are now approaching our 75th anniversary. And we were literally a large group of HR people talking to other HR people about HR stuff. Very, very important sort of role in society, but it wasn't enough because we weren't thinking broadly enough about other groups that we needed to talk to. So what we've done over the last now 5 years, 3 to 5 years, and in reality, is we began to transform the organization to have a broader remit, where we would be all things work. We would be influenced by what's happening on the policy and the political stage. We would also influence what business leaders, CEOs and CXOs think about human capital, in addition to HR professionals. So in shorthand, I've said we are now as SHRM focused on 3 groups: CEOs, politicos, and CHROs. Those are the 3 influencer groups that if we get it right, we can truly elevate HR.
No, well, and to your point, and elevate the work experience that people have. It's so core to our lives,
yes,
right? And to have an organization like SHRM led by somebody that, like you, that is like really trying to do, as you say, all things work related, and because it's just so important, and so. I'm so glad that you had the vision to kind of take on that remit, as you said.
Oh, thank you. It's a product of a ton of people here. We have a great team here in our Alexandria headquarters and offices in India. We have offices with 3 offices in India, 1 in Dubai, California. We have a couple of offices. So we've literally taken this on as a global remit, and I'm very excited about what we're becoming.
How would you measure success then? Like if we start to kind of fast forward 5 years, how do we know we've made progress?
A couple of things, and I think very tangibly so. One is when we go into college and university campuses, students are talking about careers in HR. Like really, just as if it is, I want to go on Wall Street, or I want to be a finance person, accountant, doctor, lawyer, what have you, that you talk about. Really talented students are saying this human capital thing is something I want to pursue for a career. Yeah. Secondly, it is when CEOs and politicos in particular, those 2 groups, actually understand the value and appreciate the value of human capital, and the people who do it, who are called human resources professionals. When that just becomes common, and boards are saying we want data about how our employees are doing, what the culture is, and they turn to HR and SHRM as a source for information and data, we've nailed it.
Yep. It's just highly ironic to me that that it would still be aspirational, that CEOs are in politicos are thinking about, oh, what about the people?
Right. God forbid.
Gosh, really?
Really? No. So,
Okay.
no, Bob, something, if I may, it's just, you're so right on that, spot on that insight. For decades, the 3 decades or so that I've been in industry, every CEO said people are our most important asset.
Right.
Every politician says it's all about the people. But in practice, when they went back to their offices, it was everything but the people. And so you're right. They've said it for a long time, but we're at this unique spot in history in a way that I've never seen in 3 decades, where I actually think they believe it now. Grudgingly, we've dragged them into the 21st century when it comes to these conversations around human beings. And now they are getting it and they're calling us out on it now. They're like, yeah, so now I'm here. I believe you. What do we do about the people? How can we get the most out of them? How can they get the most out of us? How can we make people's lives better?
Yeah, well, it's funny you say that. Before the pandemic, the way that I say it is, for a lot of people, work was the frame, and your life had to fit into that frame somehow. And the pandemic has clearly flipped the script on that. And now the frame is life, and where does work fit into it? And I think that's a lot of what's driven. We'll talk a little bit about work from home and DEI and some things in a minute. But it's like these are real human beings with real lives that were highly disrupted. And they're not just work producing units and quote assets. These are people with, and everything that goes with being fully human. And, I think circumstances conspired against those two constituents that kind of push them into a corner and said, guys, y'all have to do something with this. You can't ignore it anymore.
Amen. Amen.
Just last question, just on SHRM, and then we'll dive into some of these topics. But personally, what are you finding to be the most rewarding aspects? You've got 5 years to kind of look back on.
That, it's sort of an extension of what I've said. People actually, when I go around, are beginning to understand what human resources professionals are. Let me tell you, and I don't have to tell you because then anyone listening to this knows, HR has not been typically depicted well in sort of culture. If you look at television, The Office, like no matter where you are, HR has not been seen as a place you'd want to go. It's the laughing stock of all of the professions. And what I've seen, and it's truly differentiated over the last couple of years, is people are seeing us as a profession and seeing us as a value added profession. That's so not the brunt of the jokes, but actually like this is serious. And by the way, not just the compliance people or the Department of No, they're actually talking about HR from the perspective of adding value to organizations, for profit or nonprofit. And that is really the thing that motivates me. And we've played some small role in that.
Well, I'm sure you played more than a small role. So using that as a segue, because I think that, if nothing else, the pandemic and the drive to work from home, right? And all of a sudden that became a strategic issue. Like, oh my gosh, how do we do this? And how do we do it well and not have the wheels completely fall off the bus while we're trying to run our business? And the CHRO became very front and center with the CEO on devising the strategies, that would work. And I guess kind of starting with that, work from home is obviously kind of a contentious topic now because there's companies that want people coming back to the office and people are going, don't want to go back to your office. Thanks anyway. I don't want your free food. I want to be home. And I guess it's sort of what's your general take on that? And then I'd love to hear you talk about maybe your observation on best in class practices that you're seeing for people to kind of find the right balance.
Yeah, so I think the term work from home is a little bit of a red herring. What we have found is, and I think let me cut to the chase, it's the reason why hybrid has ultimately come out as I think the way we're going to operate going forward, hybrid, a workplace. It's because, yes, going back to March, April, May of 2020, when none of us even knew if the next day was going to exist, right? Of course you wanted to work from home for your safety, right? Your very life was dependent upon not coming into a workplace and putting you and your family at risk. Unfortunately, the narrative became then everyone wants to work from home, and that just isn't quite right. Over time, what we've learned is what people really wanted was flexibility.
Yeah.
They wanted to get away from the Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, come to work, to sit in a cube, speak to no one, to go back home, right? So it was like, what's the point of this if I don't need to be there to get my work done? In fact, it in some ways has made me less productive, made me less engaged. So what the pandemic delivered to us, which I tell people, the pandemic wasn't all bad. There were some great things that were the result of it, especially for the HR profession, but frankly, for all human beings. It forced us to challenge our notions of traditionally what is work, what is the workplace, when is work done, by whom is work done. So we were forced to really revisit it all. And on the other side of this, again, taking you to the end of the beginning of the end, was we now have almost every business I know, and there are exceptions, have finally accepted the fact that some work, a lot of work, can be done quite effectively, not within the four walls of the building. And that when we bring people together, we must do so intentionally and with purpose. There has to be some upside to doing it other than the CEO wants us to come in and the C-suite team members want us to come in, that there's actually some value. Now, what that has done, and we're in the middle of, I don't have to tell you because you know this, is we went from working remote to people now saying hybrid, and we're figuring out, we're very early on in this grand experiment. It drives me nuts that we figured this out. We haven't. Frankly, the first year of this, people were forced to work from home when there was nothing to do. There were no movie theaters, there were no coffee shops, there was not, right? No one flew anywhere. You hunkered down. So yes, we had incredible productivity, and we proved that it could be done using technology. What we have now is a different situation. People actually can also live and work, sort of the blurring of work and the workplaces you've defined at the box versus like fitting in. And so now we're trying to figure out, how do we do this such that we optimize employee engagement, employee satisfaction, while at the same time helping organizations maintain their culture. And at the same time, ensuring that organizations get a return on their investment. So Bob, this is the sometimes area that people get kind of annoyed with me. In many organizations, most, in fact, the number one expense line is people. It's labor, it's wages, right? And so employers have a right to expect a return on that investment. Right? It's just fair. So while, yes, the conversation is important about, I want to work from home, we have to also allow corporations to say, and what do I get for it, given that I'm going to pay you to work at home? That's where we are right now. As a workforce, as human resources professionals, we're trying to figure out that magic word that you used at the end, which was balance.
Yes. Well, and I'll reflect magic word back to flexibility, right?
Yes.
And I think that's such it seems like anytime something is mandated, it's almost destined to fail.
Absolutely.
And maybe as it should, but bring that flexibility. Like, I'm a big believer though in, we're better together, and there's things that happen when we're interacting, in person that don't happen in a Zoom world, and you can't slack your way to greatness sometimes. Right.
Well,
it's like, but and then I think also, there's a sense of belonging that I think that people want. And yes, I like being at home, and I like, having dinner with my family, being home when my daughter gets home from school. Like, those are really great things, those from a life perspective. But at work, there's a lot of value of interacting with my colleagues, feeling part of a team, and sometimes you can feel isolated. And then there's just sort of all the casual innovation that happens in knowledge transfer that happens because we're just in proximity to one another, that doesn't happen, when we're just connected, tethered technologically.
Well, no, you're spot on. I mean, I could go through all of those things, but the one that caught my attention is the esprit de corps, the sense of belonging to something. Otherwise, if we truly, truly operate in a fully remote environment, then work becomes very transactional. we have worked so long to build a relationship with our employees. We even use terms like my work family. And it's very, very transactional, which means if you're just going to do work for me and I'm going to pay you, then we actually create a very transactional relationship that I think breaks down the society and breaks down culture, runs counter to culture. Now, again, I'm not longing for the past when I say everyone should get back to the 9 to 5 Monday through Friday workday, but I am suggesting that we absolutely lose something, and we know it. There's all sorts of research. Remember, this is an experiment, and we're early on in the data collection, but there are very strong indications that we do lose something when people are working fully remotely. In fact, we have some data that tells us 1 in 4 Americans in the workplace report feeling down, helpless, isolated, depressed, because during that period when everyone was working remotely, they weren't doing what human beings do, which is interact and innovate. We also know that, and this is a real one that I talk about in diversity, equity, and inclusion circles in particular, right? I want to specifically tie it to remote work, because there were no shortage of headlines that came out about a couple of months ago when they said, different groups, Black women don't want to come back to the workplace anymore because they're now not being subjected to the microaggressions that they had experienced pre-pandemic. And interesting line of thinking. What I would do and say and will do and say in response to that is, but at what cost? The reality is that term that you described, proximity, matters. And what we've learned, especially as an African American who grew up in corporate America, is we used to always say our challenge with going up the corporate ladder is we didn't have exposure, we didn't have visibility, we couldn't build relationships with senior managers who in most cases were white males. Well, imagine what happens if you're at home, but your colleagues are back in the office. You're fully remote because that's what you asked for. Meanwhile, the people in the office are building those relationships. All of the work that we've done to increase diversity, equity, inclusion, opportunity, mobility within organizations is now potentially, we're going to lose ground. And the person who says that's what I want doesn't know what that looks like 5, 10, 15 years from now in their career, because they've not built a network. Yes, they can technically do the job, but they've not built a community of sponsors and allies who can vouch for them when they go into the workplace and are looking for that next job or that promotion internally. So I think we've got to be very careful about giving people what they want, because I don't think they fully understand the long-term implications.
Well, that is just such an insightful point that you're making, because it is about the relationships that you build. And as you say, the sponsors, the mentors, the advocates. And if all we're doing is transacting, as you say, then none of that happens. And so I think that's one. But thank you for kind of jumping on to the next thing that I was hoping that we could talk about, which is diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging. How do you make this? How do you counsel members and their companies that these are more than just talking points and programs and posters, but like real change is happening? What are the things that you're sharing with your members?
So we talk about it in the context of, and I'm going to start, like I've been at this work, as I said, for 3 decades. And I was around when we only talked about diversity. Then we added the I, then we added the E, and now there's the A for access, the B for belonging. I mean, the acronym alphabet soup.
I missed the A, so okay.
Yeah, A for access. I asked at a meeting, I said, what's the A? And they explained it to me. So here's the deal. I love the evolution. And I think net, this is positive from that standpoint. The struggle that we have, and that I think presents the best opportunity for us, is to think more broadly about diversity, and not just limited to the civil rights diversity. Again, I'm not poo-pooing it. I'm not saying that's not important, but more broadly, that as we bring people together who are different, and different can mean class as race, as much as race. It can be political viewpoint as well as gender. It can be age as well. Like there's just so many different dimensions of diversity that if we're doing this as a program, you're going to overwhelm your workforce with programs. Like they say, I have a job to do, and now you got all these initiatives, and every day I'm supposed to be learning about something different. Like it's a lot. What we think, we're moving toward and away from diversity programs and initiatives to culturally embedded diversity. It becomes the way that you do business, the way you operate. Listen, I love things like the Rooney Rule that the NFL sort of created, but at the end of the day, should we have to do that? Should we have to prescribe to managers, hiring managers, you need 2 of this, 1 of this, a quarter of this? Like, it's absurd. And what that means is you focus too much on initiatives and programs and the administrative side of this, sort of very tactical, instead of building within your organization a true, now atrophied muscle, by the way, of embracing diversity. We just have not done this well because we're so focused on checking the box. So as we think about this, and I'm talking with people, we represent 1.6 million companies across the United States right now. We have members in these companies, and what they're telling us more and more and more is what you did, I'm not going to say didn't work, but it doesn't continue to work because we have moved from diversity to inclusion. And frankly, all of us are beginning to appreciate that diverse workforces create a new issue. We all thought that the Holy Grail was having a more diverse workforce. And the real challenge now is inclusion, because I have this phrase that I use. We are as diverse as we've ever been in this country from a workforce standpoint. And at once we're as divided as we've ever been. So we got diversity, but it wasn't like sort of the panacea. It didn't solve our problems. We created a really, really big problem, which is managing diverse populations, people who are different. That's hard. And that's where we're going now. We're leaving the focus. We renamed our conference at SHRM. It used to be the Diversity Conference. It's now called the Inclusion Conference, because you're going to get diversity. America's public school systems are majority minority. We're going to be more diverse. Your workforce will be more diverse unless you intentionally decide for it not to be. What you've got to do is figure out how to make each of those people, those groups, feel like they are included and that they belong.
Let's piggyback on that idea for a minute, please, because I read the article in the Financial Times where we're talking about you've got diversity, but you got some very polarized diversity, and like as you say, you kind of squeeze the balloon, and now like another thing happened, and like, oh gosh, we're counting on that, and so. Do you mind sharing with the audience, what your perspective was now that you've got all these, different pockets of very strongly held beliefs and kind of bringing your whole self to work? It's like, oops, not sure I completely meant that. And so how would you maybe kind of build on where I'm going with what that article was talking about?
Yeah, so the article, for those of you who don't, it was around political diversity in the workforce. And we happed upon this, I think it was 2018 or 19. We launched some work from the SHRM research group. And we, as you just don't know, we have a large research team of PhDs, IO psychologists, statisticians, and we're constantly surveying and polling employees and workers to understand what's happening so that we therefore can equip HR people with the things that they need to do their jobs effectively. And what we began to sense was that the divide in the workplace, the number one divide in the workplace, wasn't race, it wasn't gender, it wasn't age, it wasn't that. It was political affiliation. Mm-hmm. It was viewpoint. People felt as if, listen, I know I can't say this about race, age, national origin, gender. I can't say that because that's against the law, but I can openly discriminate, harass, chill from a chill in the conversation standpoint, conversations around political diversity. So you come to work, and if your tag is blue and mine is red, I can actually not talk to you. I can, during an interview, ask you what's your political affiliation, or try to figure it out from your LinkedIn profile, and as a result, not hire you, not give you opportunities. And then when we did bring people into the workforce, if they were somehow to get past the hiring manager and not identify their political affiliation, when they came into the workforce, they faced outright toxicity. So what we were shocked at from our research findings was that political affiliation and political viewpoint was such a basis of toxicity in the workplace that people were leaving in droves looking for other opportunities. The opposite of diversity. So we began doing that work, monitoring it, figuring out how we could have conversations in the workplace. And then you had the 2020 election You want to talk about, woo, a divide. And then you went into, and we're facing now the 2022 divide. In other words, the country is so divided. I read something the other day that said politics are the new religion. And that's just the reality. And so we have these divides in the workplace that we're trying to bring together. And so what we are doing, and people like you, Bob, and all of us are saying, is we've got to not just focus on the more traditional types of different traditional types of diversity. We're going to talk more broadly and include different types of viewpoints and beliefs. And it's catching on. It's ugly, though, let me tell you, because we have now, as I said, it's the religion, and we all have one, and we think the other person's religion is wrong, or at the minimum, ours is more right. And as a result, the divide in the workplace is pretty darn ugly. We are losing really talented people, and it's not good for us, especially in the middle of the Great Resignation and the war for talent.
Yeah. And I don't know if this is right or not right, but as I think about this topic, it seems like the value that needs to be embraced is respect.
Civility
and respect.
That's right, hands down. And it's funny, and I challenge organizations and leaders a lot. I said, forever we've said we're about diversity. I can't tell you the number of companies, I dare say 60-70% of the Fortune 500 call out in their values or guiding principles or whatever statements that they have on their plaques around the office, diversity. We're committed to diversity. But in practice, they're not, right? It's diversity as long as I agree with it, right? And so we have called that out and said to HR professionals, to hiring managers, business leaders, listen, if you're not committed to diversity, then say it. But if you are, then that means you've got to get comfortable working alongside people who share different viewpoints. And you have to find a way to have discussions versus debates. You've got to find a way to disagree without being disagreeable. And that gets back to this concept of respect. And we've lost that. Like, there was a time when we could all disagree. Think about that. There's some interesting research that talks about there are families that can't talk about politics over the dinner table anymore. Like, they just can't have the conversation. And that level of just vitriol toward the other side now shows up in the workforce. So I say there's the lunchroom table and the dining room table. Neither of them now can talk about that. And it's troubling and troublesome. But the good news is people like you and I are talking about it and daring people. I'm just thinking back right now, harken back to the day after the Trump victory. Let me tell you, I had people calling in saying, I can't come to work this week. Like, I just can't do this. And I had people who did come to work and saying, I can't sit next to that person. I was so shocked. And I said, you do understand how this works, right? Two people in a race, someone's going to win, someone's going to lose. You do know that, right? And so what we've got to do, half of or more of the population was going to be unhappy their person didn't lose. But how is that different than the Super Bowl in some ways, right? The next morning, your team won and the other team didn't. And I'm not trying to, by the way, minimize this and reduce it to that. My point being, we did not embrace diversity. We talked about diversity, but we truly don't embrace diversity. And that's an opportunity for human resources professionals to actually walk the talk.
Yeah. We had David Taylor, recently retired CEO of P&G.
Yes.
And we talked about diversity. And, I just so admire and respect David, for all kinds of great reasons. But when we talked about diversity, he just really talked about like how just like we're better together and seeing things from another person's point of view. And it sparks ideas and creativity and empathy. And I mean, just like lots of really good qualities. And yet when we, as you say, on the one hand, preach diversity, as long as you agree with me, then we're actually shutting down a lot of really, really great benefits that make us better companies, but also better people.
That's right. It's funny when you think about it, though. I'm not surprised at where we are. I think back to the earliest, and I think you'd agree, we used diversity experts at the time, and I was one of them, would say things like, we're going to focus on valuing our differences. We're going to focus on tolerating people who are different. Like we so focused, I think we overcorrected. We so focused on our differences as opposed to our commonalities. And by the way, you and I'm an African-American man, you're a Caucasian American male. We have far more in common than we have different. But we, as a profession or a group of diversity experts, like really focused on how different we are. And it's actually counterintuitive. If you think about it, you walk into a reception where you don't know anyone, you walk up to someone and you start looking for what we have in common, not different. You don't walk up, you walk, where'd you go to school? Where'd you grow up? What we're doing is we're trying to find what we have in common. It's obvious that we're different, right? We got that from off the jump. That's it. So then the question is, but so human beings naturally try to find what we have in common. All of our diversity initiatives, our diversity narratives and everything were around our differences. And so no surprise, fast forward 3 decades later, tons of money, tons of effort, that we haven't achieved inclusion because we were so focused on how different we were.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm going to continue to enjoy reading what you have to say on this topic. And as you're leading from the front, on this kind of an issue. And I'm so thankful that, someone with your influence and passion, is helping guide the conversation on this.
Thank you, Bob. Let me just say this, though, I got to make a pitch for this. I need your support. And I'm being honest. And anyone who's listening to this, this is not well received by people. Like, right? They would prefer be at odds with each other than find ways to unify each other. We can actually get along with people who think differently, who look differently, whose experiences are different than ours. And this is not an easy sell. You'd like to think that this is easy, but every time I go out with this, and I'm going to take on I won't go into the topic because my folks won't let me, but the very controversial topic around the most recent Supreme Court decision. Okay. The bottom line is, I'm not here to say what's right or what's wrong or what the court did. It's not the conversation, but the fact of the matter is there's a split. Americans feel one way about the issue and Americans feel the other way about the issue. And if all we can do is let each group go to their corners, we'll never unite this country. We won't. And that worries me more than anything. But I need your support when I say these things, because while you and I can sit here and have a great conversation and say, I get it, the attacks from the cowards on the internet who won't use their real names a lot of times, and it's exhausting, because all I want us to do is bring us together, because we're stronger together, to use your phrase.
Johnny, there's a reason I wanted you to be on. So yes, I am very happy to support you in that. One thing that I'm very passionate about, and I would love to hear you talk about this, and I honestly don't know your answer on this one, but it does tie into diversity and inclusion, which is around folks who do not have a 4-year degree and their suitability for working in corporate America. And so forever and forever, you first thing, 4-year degree, and then we kind of go down the list from there. And well, minorities disproportionately, and I'm going to be redundant, over-index on not having a 4-year degree. Right. So all of a sudden they've been excluded from the talent pool before we even started to say, well, you might actually be really good at this. Or this is the kind of thing that you need to know a lot about the Canterbury Tales to do this job. But if you know how to do cybersecurity, like I could use Oxygen. Yes. But you don't have a CS degree, so I'm really sorry, you can't work here. By the way, we've got 40 openings for cybersecurity, and we're trying to outbid the next employer, and we just keep taking our people costs up. I'm a huge believer in that there are, just talking tech jobs for a minute, but we've got our mutual friend Maurice at 110 and other places that it's not just tech jobs, but cloud computing, software engineering, cybersecurity, these are future-proof jobs, or they're certainly future-forward jobs. I'll say it that way. It continues to evolve, but there seems to be this resistance that those are candidates that we can and should be considering. And I'd love to hear your take on that.
Yes, so it's done. And there's no other way.
Mic drop. It's done.
It's done. It's amazing to me that we have, and I'm not going to blame all of this on HR, by the way, because I think there is some lazy HR going, which means the degree is a proxy, and the type of school you went to is even more of a proxy, and your ranking in the class is like we've literally layered in so that we thought we were making it more efficient, the talent acquisition process. So that's on the HR side. On the hiring manager side, since most people in management have a degree, guess what? We have a bias. We have a bias towards people who have a college degree. And as such, the hiring manager is asking HR to bring them candidates who have college degrees. HR, when it pushes back, and on occasion, I've met some really talented TA and recruitment professionals who do, they say the hiring managers won't hire them. So there's this interesting dynamic where everyone's pointing at each other. Well, let's just face it, there's some realities. The American birth rate has been on a 22-year decline. In fact, during 2020, the pandemic year, the birth rate dropped 4% over the prior year. So we don't have the luxury, let's just be blunt, we don't have the luxury in a growing economy to have to select people out who could otherwise do the job. So that's when I use the word dumb. It's like if you're trying to grow your business and you need people and you are weeding out people who could do the job because of your bias, either because you think it's efficient or because you think, well, I went to college and you should go to college too, then this is like silly. It really is. So what we've done, and I'm so glad you brought this topic up, if you can't tell I'm passionate about it, is we've said we have got to literally destigmatize not having a degree. That is not in any way to be confused with me saying a degree doesn't matter. I actually think and will forever believe, and I'm thankful, I'm a product of what a college degree can do for you, having parents who didn't finish college, first generation, and what it has done to my life. So destigmatize not having a degree. You talk about double negative, right? So that's what this is about right now. And this will be one of my enduring pieces of work, is that we use our platform, HR professionals, to get over our own biases, but also to try and influence hiring managers to say, listen, we have a limited number of people. Back to that birth rate. As a result of having fewer people, we are going to have to look at untapped pools of talent. That includes the formerly incarcerated. It includes people who are differently abled. It includes people who don't have college degrees. And I got to tell you just a quick anecdote. So right here at SHRM, we're supposed to be the organization that gets this better than anyone. We open, you talk about tech jobs, programming, and all those jobs future forward. What about sales? So one of my executives said, I'm going to look for a VP of sales. He sent me the position description, the little rec we have to sign off on. And I look at it, it's VP of sales, bachelor's degree required. So what? Some of the best and most talented salespeople, you want to talk about a future for a job, there's always going to be salespeople. They didn't have college degrees. So I pushed back on them and I said, you got to make the case to me. There is no reason in the world that someone in sales needs a bachelor's degree to do this job, right? So he comes back and he says, okay, I revisited the job description, I've rewritten it, and it says bachelor's degree preferred. he thought he had done something, right? So, and this is at SHRM. I can be vulnerable enough to say even we have the bias right here in this organization. What we have to do is get over ourselves when it comes to this. We don't have the luxury of looking over talent. And there are a lot of really talented people who can do corporate jobs, by the way, desk jobs that don't require it. So we're doing a lot of work right now with Stand Together, 110, a number of organizations, Opportunity at Work, to see how can we, sort of not eliminate the job description, because I think you do have to tell people, you do have to describe the job, but we've got to be thoughtful to say, what do you do in this job? And then figure out if the person on the other side of the interview can do it. Not do they have a degree to get these jobs.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And just to put the exclamation point on that, I believe that when we get further down the road, because I think Joe Fuller at Harvard says just like we would open the talent pool by 30 million people. That's a lot of people. But so one, it improves that person's life. by
Yes.
definition, right? And Perscolis, which is an organization I'm very passionate about, they talk about thriving wages, not living wages, because that sounds like your water spraying up in your nose. It's like, no. Thriving wages. Families get changed, communities get changed,
Here, here.
right? And then the companies are better. We had Julie Elberfeld, who's CIO at Capital One,
Yes.
and she came on and she talked about when they were doing like application development, like consumer apps, getting people in the room that, didn't come from the same background, saying, well, no, actually, I wouldn't use it that way. I would use it this way. Like, if they had not hired some of these folks in, they never would have gotten that perspective, and they would have launched, if not bad, at least suboptimal consumer-facing apps, counterproductive to their aim.
That's
right.
And you're right. It's a diversity initiative at its core. This is really
core to diversity issue, I believe. So super quick, and last kind of topic is around layoffs. Yes. So, the economy is shifting, and, what doesn't seem like very long ago, we're in this red hot OMG talent market. And all of a sudden, just like the brakes got slammed on, and we went from, fifth gear to second anyway.
That's right.
And, like, whoa. And I think even, some CEOs are saying, hey, even though my business is kind of okay right now, like, I don't know if I need, it feels prudent maybe to kind of trim the workforce back a little bit, all the way to companies like, oh gosh, we've got to let go of 40% of our people or we're going to be dead next week.
That's right.
So how are y'all, kind of talking about layoff issues? And I would really love to hear you talk about what you think, back to human beings and not, assets, right. Not just a cell on a spreadsheet, but the best way to, when we have to, I don't know if this is a good word or bad word, offboard folks, but, how can you help us think better about reductions in force?
Yeah, so I'm going to quickly now. So let me start with, we're seeing two things happening. There are the companies that are trimming, reducing their workforce for financial reasons. So three. The second category is the ones who are looking around the corner and saying, I may not need to do it now, but to prevent layoffs in the future, I'm going to prepare. So they're hunkering down. They're not in trouble, but they're being thoughtful about managing their workforce so that they don't have to do a big layoff later. And then you are seeing what I've begun to see more and hear more about, which is what I've used the term top grading. They're looking around the organization saying, I now have the luxury of being able to go into the market and get a different level of talent. So the person who I settled for 18 months ago, I can now replace. So that person isn't losing their job because the company is actually reducing its footprint from an employee population standpoint. They're actually going to be replaced with someone the company says can do this job better, more effectively, more efficiently. So we're seeing all of that at one time, which is a shock to the system. I cannot disagree with you more. It's like overnight it happened. And then the layoffs started in the tech space. And then you saw the big retailers, Walmart, all of them saying, Amazon saying, we overhired.
Yes.
We overhired, and that we hadn't heard that in years, right? While at the same time, we see ultra low unemployment. I saw today, just today, the number of open jobs in America has dropped to 10.7 million. Still a lot, but a lot lower than the 11 million plus we've been talking about for last year, right? So there is a sign that the market is shifting. To your question, what can we do? There are a couple of things I want us to remember. You always, the guiding principle has to be empathy.
Yes.
You've got to make tough decisions. I got it. But it's the how when a reduction in force is necessary. So we start with, all of the rules about try to do them one-on-one. You don't want to do these cattle calls where everyone gets on a Zoom or even in a room and they experience their termination with everyone. That's horrible. And we know that to be the case. That being said, given the drastic, in some cases, draconian numbers, I don't know if you saw the other day, 7-Eleven laid off 900 people. And I understand they tried to do it with, the way we tell them to do it. There's no way to do that. There's no easy way to break someone's heart. Well, that's where you are. So what we say to employers is do a couple of things. One, be very thoughtful. If you're going to have to do it, go to the rest of the market and find employers who are still hiring. maybe try to do playmatch.com. Like, I'm not going to date you anymore. There's someone else who will date you who's looking for someone just like you. So get a little bit more proactive. Secondly, really work on managers knowing how to do this as humanely as possible. Again, there's no way to make this feel good, but humanely. And we've seen countless examples of people do this very wrong. They don't have empathy. They don't even have sympathy. They just destroy people's lives. And something you said earlier, Bob, which is critical, that person then has to go home. So it does just impact that person. It's how they treat their children, their spouse, like their community. They're angry. And we play a role in making sure that as people transition to new roles, or even to the unemployment roles as they try to find a new role, that we do so with dignity and respect. That's probably the biggest thing here. Is you got to do it, but it's how you do it that's coming into play. The final thing is we're seeing more and more employers say, I'm just not going to put you out there. I'm going to put you out there, offboard you, but with some hope. And the hope oftentimes shows up in the form of, resume support, job support, like ways so that you just don't wake up one day employed, the next day not employed, with any hope of becoming re-employed. That's a critical part of the work that we do. And just doing this, all of this sort of rolls up to being empathetic. Ultimately, ask yourself, what must that person be experiencing? What would I be feeling?
That's right.
If I were on the other side of this? And that will guide the way we go through what is going to be some tumult in the employment markets, just as we saw the volatility in the financial markets.
Yeah. So that thank you for saying empathy and humanely. And hey, what if this was happening to me?
That's right.
How would I want to be treated?
That's
And as you say, these people are going home and they've experienced a loss. And what we see is until their emotions are in a better spot, they're actually ill-equipped to go get another job.
Bingo.
Right. And your word toxicity, there's a toxicity that's internally that until that's cleansed. Well, first of all, don't do that to people. Then we don't have to worry about it. But to the extent it is, you're just like doubly hurting somebody to move on to a healthy next place. So this is awesome. Like you talked earlier about, I really appreciate it, like making HR a cool place to be. If you were giving a talk, and you probably do this, but if you're giving a talk to a group of, high school sophomores or college sophomores, you're still picking their major, kind of thing, what they want to do. Maybe I graduated with a general business degree. I don't know what I don't know. Make the pitch for why HR is a great place for me to take my career.
We're a knowledge-based economy now. We moved from the agricultural to the automated and all of that. We are now clearly and squarely for the next, for as long as we can foreseeably, we're going to be in a knowledge-based economy. And knowledge-based economies thrive because of people, who they have doing their jobs. Like I can make a phone, Nokia can make a phone, Apple can make a phone, but ultimately it's who has the best people designing it, thinking about it, selling it, marketing it, all of that good stuff. So you're going to be literally, if you join HR, you're going to join the profession that helps your organization not just survive, but as you've called it, thrive. You literally cannot grow a business without the right people, full stop. So how cool is it to be involved in helping organizations find those people, motivate and engage those people, and ultimately promote those people? If you can do that, you literally will walk home at night. And I've had that moment when I say, this business is working because of me. I mean, it literally is. And I'll tell you quickly, when I was at Blockbuster, I really would appreciate the fact that if a store had 3 fewer staff that night, we sold less product. We rented fewer videos. Mm-hmm. So I literally could tie my work as an HR professional to the overall financial success of this business. Now that's really a powerful feeling from a professional standpoint.
Yeah, but no, that's awesome. And again, you talk about future proof. Everybody needs salespeople. Everybody needs people. And we need folks that know how to optimize and create the best environment possible for people to thrive. And that's an HR professional. Johnny, if people wanted to learn more about SHRM, what's the best way for them to do that?
Well, it's kind of easy. It's SHRM, SHRM.org. And we have tons of information. Some of it you got to become a member to get past, into the deep research, well-financed work. But but there's a lot of information for employees, employers alike. So go check it out, SHRM.org.
Awesome. Johnny, I cannot tell you how much fun this has been. You're a fun person, but wow, the depth of knowledge, insight, expertise was just off the chart. And I'm just so pleased to have had the opportunity to spend a few minutes with you today. So thank you.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you to all. And for all of you out there doing the work, keep up the battle. We're changing lives.
Amen. Awesome. Thank you. Thanks so much. And thank you everyone for listening. This has been a wonderful interview. And Johnny, thank you again.
Thank you. Be well.